buenos días y bienvenue. Welcome to D4, the D&D Deep Dive. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. We theorycraft about them, we crunch numbers, not with the intent to tell you the right way or the best way to play a character necessarily, but to explore one potential way to build and play a character in D&D with the hopes of creating something that is both very fun but also really powerful to play. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D, almost as much as you enjoy playing the game itself, or you're just looking for tips or ideas on a character that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I am so glad you're here. I really am. So thanks for being here. My name's Colby, and I'll be your host. Really quick, before we jump in, today, as of this recording anyway, we launched our LFG app. It's kind of that Tinder for tabletop role-playing gamers that are looking for other people to play with. If you haven't checked it out yet, please do so. Just go to lfg-app.com. That's the Kickstarter page, and as of this recording anyway, we're well on our way to funding, so maybe by the time this comes out, we'll be there, but if not, we could especially use your help, so thank you. All right, let's just jump in. I have done a lot of builds with Paladin levels on this channel. Paladins, as most of you know, I'm sure, are incredibly powerful characters. I think you could make a really strong argument that they're one of the most powerful, base character classes in all of 5e. They get a lot of features that let them excel at defense, utility, and burst damage. And their aura of protection is something that no party in D&D ever wants to be without, right? That said, to date, if I'm not mistaken, every single character build that I've done that has Paladin levels has either been built for burst damage, the vast majority of the time, or in a rare case or two for tanking. I don't believe I have ever built a character for sustained damage per round, DPR, that included Paladin levels. And by sustained damage, right, we're talking just damage that you can do round after round without necessarily expending a lot of expensive resources. That's kind of weird, I think, right? But then again, maybe not. Their Divine Smite feature is such a fantastic feature to use for doing burst damage that it's really hard, for me anyway, to not build around that feature when it's available. But the thing is, while being able to do burst or nova damage on a character is a really fun and powerful option to have in your party, there's also no denying the value of really solid sustained DPR as well. Being able to just deliver consistently high damage every single turn tends to be my favorite way to build and play characters, as evidenced by the fact that I've built more sustained DPR characters on this channel than probably all other builds put together. As you guys know, I just really, really like things that are dependable, that are going to deliver all the time without me having to worry about whether or not I save or spend my few and precious resources in order to be really effective in combat, right? But if the Paladin already excels at basically every other aspect of combat with all of their support, utility, defensive, and burst features, maybe, just maybe, focusing on trying to make them really good at sustained damage is sort of the way to create the ultimate good at everything in the game, most well-rounded powerhouse of a character that D&D 5e has to offer. I don't know. What do you think? Worth a try at least, right? So that is what we're going to do today. See if we can't find a way to really maximize the sustained DPR that we can get out of a character build that is firstly and mostly a Paladin. Sounds fun. And so I proudly present episode 96, The Holy Warrior. Big thanks to my friend Randall Hampton, who creates fantastic artwork for the character concepts that I send him each week. I am constantly and continually impressed and amazed at his skill. He always does a great job of capturing pretty perfectly the way that I envisioned the character looking when I build them, and this is no exception to that, as always. If you would like to follow Randall, to just keep tabs on all the artwork that he does, or maybe even reach out to him to try and commission him to create something for you or your party, I will, as always, put links in the video description on how to do so. So thanks, Randall. But before we jump into the build really quick, I wanted to talk to you guys about the sponsor for the video this week, Roll for Combat. Some of you may recall Roll for Combat sponsored a video of mine last year for their Kickstarter that they were doing for their Battlezoo stuff, Battlezoo Bestiary primarily, a Kickstarter project that funded almost instantly the moment it launched, and last time I checked it was like 15 times over their initial funding goal. So these guys know what they're doing. They've got a great track record of putting out quality 5e compatible and Pathfinder compatible content. They're launching another Kickstarter at the end of July, and I'm going to talk about this new Kickstarter a few times over the next several weeks because the stuff that they're going to be putting out looks really cool. 3 main things: an addition to their Battlezoo Bestiary called Strange and Unusual, a book called Battlezoo Ancestries, Year of Monsters, and then the one I'm going to focus on today, Battlezoo Eldamon. If you like D&D, but you also really like Pokemon, then you're going to want to pay attention here. Battlezoo Eldamon is going to be a beautifully illustrated hardcover book that presents some new options, again, compatible with both 5e and also Pathfinder 2e. That's going to be a system that allows you to collect, befriend, train, and battle mysterious ancient creatures formed from elemental magic that can populate your world, known as Eldamon. There are 160 unique different Eldamon, and they will evolve as you take them from being your pet when you first befriend them to a battle form once you start training them and fighting with them, all the way up to a final evolved form as you and they continue to level up and you enhance your bond together. These Eldamon can appear in any number of locations. They're each tied to a different element. There's going to be a rarity system for them, and like I say, they can be befriended, trained, and used by anyone. But there will be 2 special new classes that I'll maybe get into a little bit more in another video: the Eldamon Trainer and the Eldamon Avatar. Anyway, so much content coming from Roll for Combat and their line of Battlezoo products. I'm super excited to have them as a sponsor again. If you're interested in signing up now to be notified when the Kickstarter launches in late July, just go to eldamon.com right here. I will link those in the video description as well. But anyway, that way you can be notified the moment it launches so you can get out there and back this project. Again, I think it's going to be a fantastic way for you to combine 2 things that you probably love, Pokemon style, like pet summoning gameplay, with D&D or Pathfinder or any other TTRPG that you play as well. It could be easily adapted to all of them. So big thanks to Roll for Combat. Looking forward to seeing your future success with this. And let's jump into the build. At level 1, for our starting class, I want to start off Paladin. Like I say, I envision this character as primarily a Paladin. And while we are going to be doing some multi-classing, I really want to beeline here for all of those yummy Paladin features that we get, at least up through Aura of Protection. So yes, when we first meet our champion, they are someone who is incredibly devoted to their ideals, I think. I wouldn't necessarily describe them as a fanatic, at least not yet. They're still learning their tenets and their oaths, maybe a bit naive, but hungry to prove themselves a champion of justice and righteousness. They might have a little bit of like an anger management issue that you could even start working into your character and roleplay early on, I think. But aside from that, I really do envision this character as sort of your Paladin's Paladin. Whether you want them to be religious or not is up to you, of course, though I think, as you'll see later, for this character, it will probably be a little bit easier from a roleplay perspective to go like the religious route. My version of them would be, I think, they're a character who believes in truth and right with a capital T and a capital R. And you could totally play them that way, whether you happen to believe those things yourself or not, right? That goes without saying, of course, but sometimes I will get comments that sort of push back on the idea of bringing religion into a character. And I guess my take is always like, we're role-playing here, right? Like, pick a role, play it. You don't have to believe the things that your character does. Exploring the character concept can be fun and interesting either way, and maybe even more so if it happens to go against something that you kind of believe yourself, my opinion. As for our race, a free feat is going to give us a huge head start, but I'm not planning on taking any half feats and am going to be pretty mad on this character, as most paladins are, multiple ability score dependent. So I think Variant Human is the better path to a free feat here at level 1 instead of custom lineage. So that's what I'm going to go with. Feel free to go a different route if you want. Of course, I think like an ASMR would be particularly fitting thematically for this character, if nothing else. And they do get some nice racial perks as well that I'm not going to get into. But yes, as a variant human, we do get a free feat at level 1. And for that free feat, I would start off with Polearm Master. For strength-based weapon users, it's really hard to beat the Polearm Master, Great Weapon Master combo for sustainable damage per round. And I think of those two feats, starting Polearm Master is probably the better choice, as the feat not only lets us make an opportunity attack against an enemy who enters our reach, as opposed to just when they leave it, right? So long as you're wielding a glaive, halberd, quarterstaff, pike, or spear. But more importantly for us, with this feat, when you take the attack action with any of the above weapons, except a pike, oddly, I guess pikes just don't have butts. You can use a bonus action to make an attack with the butt of the weapon. This is affectionately known as the butt action at our table. Adding your strength modifier to the damage with that bonus action attack, of course. So right at level 1, we have a nice, consistent bonus action that will become even better later on once we can apply our Great Weapon Master damage to that bonus action butt action attack as well. As for our ability scores, I assume the point buy method as always, and it's a little tough. Like I say, Paladins are notoriously mad. They want good ability scores in at least 3 stats: strength, charisma, and constitution, right? And to boot, on this character, I would really love to be able to get as high a dex score as possible for reasons that we'll see later. But we don't have enough points to do everything that I want, of course. So I'm going to recommend starting with a 15 strength and taking one of our +1s from variant human there for a 16, a 15 in charisma and another +1 there, so 16 in charisma as well, and a 14 constitution and probably a 10 dexterity. Right now, we're fine to wear heavy armor. We don't need that dexterity score for our armor class, and more hit points and a higher constitution saving throw is very welcome on any character. And yes, before you say anything in the comments, we could take a 1-level dip into Hexblade here and be a little less mad, so we could sort of just focus on our charisma score, but nah. Not on this character, I don't think. Go ahead and do that if you'd like, but I don't love the Hexblade dip here for 2 reasons. 1, it just really doesn't fit with my character concept. And 2, if you want to use a 2-handed weapon like a glaive or a halberd with charisma as your attack ability as a Hexblade, you would have to put 3 levels into Warlock to pick up Pact of the Blade. And I just really don't want to delay our Paladin features that long. As for our equipment, pretty standard stuff. I'd say start off with chainmail and then either a glaive or a halberd and whatever other necessities you may have. Like I said, pikes don't get a butt action, and spears and quarterstaves are cool, but glaives and halberds do more damage and have a 10-foot melee reach, so I'd go with one of those. As a paladin at level 1, then we do get the Lay on Hands feature, which gives us 5 points per paladin level that you can use as an action to either heal 1 hit point per Lay on Hands point spent. You can do this on yourself or another ally with a touch, or you can actually cure a poison or disease if you spend 5 of those points. It's a super effective and efficient heal that scales really nicely as you level. Consistently useful. We also get Divine Sense as a Paladin 1, a slightly less attractive feature. Basically 1 plus charisma modifier times per day. As an action, you can detect any celestial, fiend, or undead that are within 60 feet of you and aren't behind total cover. At level 2, we get a fighting style. Since we're planning on building this character to get as much sustainable DPR as we can out of them, I'll go ahead and take the Great Weapon fighting style here, but it's really not very good. When you are using 2 hands to make a melee weapon attack, you can re-roll any 1s or 2s that you roll for the weapon damage, but it's the weapon damage only, not anything else you might be adding on top of that attack, like a Divine Smite or anything, right? So really on average, this is an increase of about 1 damage per attack if you round. But I mean, that said, if I had a nickel for every time that I got an enemy to 1 hit point, in fact, in the first ever campaign that we did that my friend Tori was DM for, we almost named our party Uno Mas due to how frequently this happened. We were constantly getting enemies to 1 hit point. So yeah, it's not a lot of damage, but it's something. And every once in a while, it'll be a difference maker. Feel free to go another route for your fighting style if you want, like defense or interception or blind fighting, etc. But we'll take great weapon fighting style. But yeah, speaking of Divine Smite, also at level 2 Paladin, we get this feature. This is usually the part of the Paladin build where I'm like, and of course, the main reason we're here is for Divine Smite. But not really with this one. Of course, it's still a fantastic feature, letting you, when you hit with a melee weapon attack, spend a spell slot to deal an additional 2d8 radiant damage, plus an extra 1d8 for each additional spell slot you spend after first level, though it caps at 5d8 or a 4th level spell slot. And you do get to add an extra 1d8 as well if the enemy is an undead or a fiend. Now, the great thing about Divine Smite, of course, is that you can wait to decide if you want to use it until after you've hit. And if that hit is a critical, then of course, if you use Divine Smite, you would get to double the Divine Smite dice as well as your weapon damage die, right? For this reason, a lot of times you'll see people wait to smite until they see that they've scored a critical hit, right? Of course, you could use Smite at other times and should if, for example, you feel confident that doing so would kill an enemy that otherwise might survive. I am going to work this into our sustained DPR numbers here, but I'm just going to treat it like, say, the Barbarian's Brutal Critical. I'm going to assume that every time we crit, we're going to add a Smite. Currently, our crit rate is only at 5%, so it's not going to come up that often. I appreciate that it's sort of an imperfect calculation method. We might not have a spell slot to spend when we crit, but I'd like to account for it somehow in our damage numbers, and this feels fairly appropriate to me. Just wanted to let you know so that you could scale back those damage numbers a smidge when I talk about them if you don't love that method of number crunching. And of course, also as a Paladin too, yeah, we get our spells. If it were me, I think I would make sure to grab Cure Wounds, so you can have a little bit more healing in a pinch if you're out of Lay on Hands points especially. And then Bless as well. It's one of the best buffs in the game. It's good all the way to level 20. It lets you, with an action and your concentration, bless up to 3 allies or 2 and yourself, so that you can add a d4 to any attacks or saving throws that you make in the next minute. This is really great. You can upcast it to affect an additional party member per spell level. So yes, even though having to spend an action to cast the spell is a bit of a bummer and means that we wouldn't be using our action to attack our enemies, the fact that multiple party members are going to get big benefits from this spell for likely an entire round of combat makes it worth using, in my opinion. We're not going to be doing so for our entire career, but at least for now, I think I would. At level 3, we get Divine Health, which means that we are immune to disease. That's great. It's probably not going to come up all that often in most campaigns, but when it does, you'll love this feature. And then, of course, we also get our Sacred Oath, our Paladin subclass. And here's the thing about Paladin subclasses. There aren't a lot of great options when you're looking for something to increase your sustained damage per round. Vengeance is sort of the most famous one for increasing at least our burst damage because of the fact that we can get advantage on all of our attacks against a single enemy with our Channel Divinity. But that's not exactly sustainable to me. Other oaths give you a great variety of like control options or support options or utility options, but really for sustained DPR, unless you're talking really late game, we kind of only have 2 to consider, I think. Oathbreakers, who get a nice little bump from their aura at level 7, but I don't really want to be an Oathbreaker on this character. It just doesn't match my character concept. If you do, because it really fits yours, or you just really want to be an Oathbreaker otherwise, I'd say go for it and enjoy what's probably the best Paladin subclass for sustained DPR purposes. The only other one that I think you could argue gives you a bump to your sustained DPR at the levels that most of us actually play the game anyway, would be, in my opinion, the Oath of Devotion. And since I've never used this oath in a character build before, and it fits the concept that I have for this character perfectly, that is what we're going with today. So here is what Wizards of the Coast has to say about the Devotion Pally. The Oath of Devotion binds a paladin to the loftiest ideals of justice, virtue, and order. Sometimes called cavaliers, white knights, or holy warriors, these paladins meet the ideal of the knight in shining armor, acting with honor in pursuit of justice and the greater good. They hold themselves to the highest standards of conduct, and some, for better or worse, hold the rest of the world to the same standards. Many who swear this oath are devoted to gods of law and good, and use their gods' tenets as the measure of their devotion. Yes, perfect. So, what are the features that we get as a devotion paladin? All paladins get channel divinity when they choose their oath. We can use it once per short rest to do one of three things based on the oath that we choose. We can use it to regain a spell slot equal to half our proficiency bonus rounded up once per day, thanks to the Harness Divine Power feature. That's actually for everybody. But then as a devotion paladin, we first off get Turn the Unholy, letting you spend an action to force both fiends and undead within 30 feet to make a wisdom save, or they are turned, meaning they basically have to spend their turns fleeing from you for 1 minute. That's pretty nice and will situationally be quite powerful. But the main reason I'm here, mechanically speaking at least, is for their second channel divinity option, Sacred Weapon. With Sacred Weapon, you can use your channel divinity to imbue your weapon with positive energy, and then for the next minute, it emits bright light in 20 feet and dim light for 20 feet beyond that. It's considered magical, if it's not already a magic weapon, for the purpose of overcoming resistances, right? And then any attacks made with that weapon, yes, this would even apply to butt action attacks, because it's the same weapon, right? They would get to add your charisma modifier to the damage that you do with that weapon. So that's a +3 to every hit right now. Now, there is one big drawback to the ability. It takes an action to use. I hate that. I wish they would have made that a bonus action. Giving up your action means no damage dealt that round. And over the course of an entire fight, an extra 3 damage per hit might not make up the difference that sacrificing an entire round's worth of damage is going to cost you. If we're taking an action to cast Bless, it gets even worse, right? Of course, that said, as it's using our channel divinity, we likely wouldn't be able to use this on every fight anyway, since we can only use our channel divinity once per short rest. That's going to depend on your table and how many fights you tend to have per short rest. But all of that said, it's still a really cool ability, and since I always assume best case scenario numbers when I crunch numbers for our damage reports, I'm going to assume that we have this active, but honestly, if I were playing this character in game, I think I'd probably only use it if I could somehow get the ability going before the fight broke out. Like, you get the sense that things are going to get violent and you preemptively use this ability before they do. Maybe you catch a villain monologuing or something. That might be easy to pull off at your table. Or your DM might consider that as starting combat and force you to roll initiative if you were to try and do so, and then use your turn to use Sacred Weapon, right? Talk it over with your DM, figure it out. And maybe you'll even get lucky and they'll have pity on you and let you use Sacred Weapon as a bonus action. At level 4, we get our first ability score increase or feat, and nothing is going to increase our sustained damage right now more than Great Weapon Master. So as a reminder, with Great Weapon Master, so long as you're wielding a weapon with the heavy property, and we are, you can add 10 to the damage that you deal with the weapon at the cost of a -5 to hit. Naturally, then the feat gets even stronger if you can get advantage or if you have a way to add to your hit chance, making Bless that much more important for us right now since we do not have a reliable way to get advantage. Generally, then, we're going to want to use this ability in most fights, though it will cause us to miss more often. But the extra damage that it gives us is going to make up for those additional misses on average, depending, of course, on the enemy armor class, because yes, there is an AC at which you're better off just not using the feat during your attacks. And if you check the graphs and the spreadsheets that I post in the video description for every video, kind of crunching the numbers and charting them, when we're using Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Master, I'll always indicate what that enemy AC is at which you should turn the feat off. The box on the spreadsheet is always in yellow. So at that enemy AC and higher, don't use the feat, just in case you didn't know. Also, with Great Weapon Master, if you get a critical hit, you can make another attack with the weapon as a bonus action. This just means for us that we'd be getting to use our bonus action to make an attack with the pointy end as opposed to the blunt end for a little bit more damage. At level 5, we get extra attack. Didn't want to delay this, it's super important for sustained damage, and I'm happy to be able to make 2 attacks when we take the attack action now instead of 1. Giving us 3 total when you include our butt action. And we also, at Pally 5, get second level spells. And while I think that Aid, Lesser Restoration, and even Zone of Truth are particularly good for support and utility, the one that I'm going to focus on here for sustained damage purposes is Find Steed, because no white knight should go into combat without their trusty mount as a companion, right? So with Find Steed, you summon a spirit that takes the form of a warhorse, pony, camel, elk, or mastiff. I'm going to assume warhorse because I really like the image, but they are also the best of the options we're given for damage. Now, it takes 10 minutes to summon them, so it's not like you can just bring them back with an action if they die or anything. But between combats, you could if you had the spell slot, right? The great thing is it doesn't require concentration, and it lasts until they die or you dismiss them. The real question, of course, is can we assume that our trusty steed will be able to make attacks every round against the target that we want them to attack? Are they a controlled mount or are they independent? Do they go on our turn? Do they have their own initiative? Unfortunately, the answer to that is going to depend a lot on your table and your DM. I've talked a lot in several other videos about the challenges and complications with mounted combat in D&D 5e. Don't really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it here. Feel free to argue or banter about it in the comments if you'd like. In fact, that would be awesome if you did. And, nor did I intend to build this character with like a focus on mounted combat necessarily, but this spell is so iconic for Paladins, and my impression is that the vast majority of tables essentially let this steed get attacks every round against the target that you want it to attack so long as it's alive, due to the fact that we're told in the spell description that you can communicate with them telepathically and that you have an instinctive bond with it that allows you to fight as a seamless unit. For some of you, that might only work if you are actually mounted on that steed. For others, they will simply just do what you want to do, regardless of whether you're actually riding them into combat or not. I would actually love to hear how Find Steed is treated at your table in the comments to help me get a little bit better sense of this in future videos. But just know that going forward, when I crunch numbers, I'm going to assume that we're getting an attack from our steed every round. Feel free to temper your expectations accordingly if you don't get to use the spell like most tables seem to, or if attacks from your steed are just less reliable. It's not a ton of damage, but it's something. One other thing to note, your warhorse does have a trampling charge feature that says if they move at least 20 feet in a straight line at their enemy and hit them with a hooves attack, the enemy has to make a DC 14 strength save or be knocked prone, and if they fail that save, the horse can make an additional hooves attack as a bonus action, this time with advantage obviously if the enemy's prone. I'm not going to try and build around that trampling charge feature or even work it into the damage numbers, but just be aware of it and try to take advantage of it as often as you can. At level 6, I was really tempted to start multiclassing at this point now that we have extra attack, but honestly, I have a really hard time imagining getting to Paladin 5 and not going one more level because Aura of Protection is just so good. It doesn't do a lot for our damage numbers, of course, unless you subscribe to the best offense is a good defense philosophy, but as a reminder, Aura of Protection gives a bonus to all of our saving throws equal to our charisma modifier, so again 3 for now, and that extends to all of our allies within 10 feet of us. It's difficult really to overestimate how strong this is for you and any party members that get to benefit from it. I think it's the thing that makes Paladins the most popular member in every party. From now on, everyone is going to want to be standing as close to you as they possibly can, assuming they weren't already, you sexy beast. All right, for our level 6 damage report then, let's review what combat looks like for us in a best case scenario, as always. I'm going to assume that you have a warhorse summoned and that it gets to make a single attack with its hooves for 2d6 plus 4 damage. It's possible that you could occasionally get a trampling charge from them as well, in which case we do even more, but again, I'm not going to assume that's happening because I want this to feel sustainable. Speaking of, yes, I am also going to assume, like I've said, that we have our Sacred Weapon Channel Divinity active as well, though I appreciate it's only good for 1 minute per short rest. As I've said in the past, my bare minimum requirement to consider damage sustainable is that it can be maintained for at least 1 entire combat encounter. So this meets that requirement, but again, I don't think it's something I'd actually use unless I could get it going before combat began, or maybe like you're really far away from your enemy and you have to spend a turn or two running up to get into melee range. Assuming all of the above, however, right now, on round 1, we'd be casting Bless to start the fight. It's such a great buff for multiple party members that I think it worth using, even if your primary role in your party is to do sustained damage. On round 2, we start swinging, making 2 attacks with our polearm as an action, then taking our butt action with our bonus attack, all with our plus 1d4 to hit thanks to Bless, and adding 10 to the damage if we hit thanks to Great Weapon Master. If we crit, we smite. And I'll just assume for ease of number crunching that we're going to do so with a first level spell slot, even though we do have some second level spell slots now. And that would give us an additional 4d8 damage, but only on crits, since we're doubling the dice, right? But again, I'm only applying it 5% of the time when we get a critical hit. And thus, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 57 DPR. And against an enemy with a 15 armor class, it would be 38 damage per round. And that's actually really solid, putting us in the upper half of tier 1 builds compared to other sustained DPR builds at this level. You'll notice that since we don't have advantage, the curve of our damage declines fairly sharply as the enemy AC goes up. So against a 10 enemy AC where we're basically landing almost every attack, it's really fantastic. But it doesn't take too long before we have to turn off that Great Weapon Master feature. At this level, we would do so at an enemy armor class of 19 or higher. And that's not bad. I mean, we're only level 6, so hopefully we won't be running into too many enemies with an AC that high at this level. But know the math, so you can use the feat judiciously. All right, so speaking of not having advantage, I think we need to rectify that situation. In fact, now that we've secured extra attack and our vaunted aura of protection, I think getting advantage should be priority number 1 on this character. The question is how to do it. There are a lot of ways to try and secure advantage in D&D 5e, of course. Spells, knocking an enemy prone if you're in melee, lots of different class and subclass features, but I think the most attractive option for me for this character is via multiclassing into Barbarian. And so at level 7, that's what we're going to do. There's just something really interesting to me, story-wise, about a straight-laced, always tries to do the right thing Paladin who maybe loses control once in a while. And like I sort of hinted at the beginning, I think if it were me, I'd probably be trying to plant seeds for this divergence from the Paladin path right from the beginning. I don't know that I'd necessarily feel like I had to justify this multi-class dip with any sort of, I was actually raised by a barbarian tribe, but was orphaned at a young age and taken in by a group of clerics, and that's where my paladin training began sort of thing in my backstory. Though you certainly could, of course. But I think, no, for me, I'd rather have something maybe in my backstory that represented like some sort of repressed traumatic experience that surfaces now and again in the form of me losing my temper despite my best attempts to keep it in check. Or maybe something that happens in game at this point in your table, work this out with your DM obviously, that causes your hero to just snap or lose control. Maybe the death of a loved one or some other great tragedy, or feeling abandoned by their god or their tenant somehow. And thus they give in here to that inner rage that they've been suppressing and that's been bubbling just under the surface. And starting now and maybe for the next few levels, they might go on a bit of a bender personality-wise as they try to learn to rein that rage back in. Or akin maybe to Dr. Banner and Hulk in Avengers Endgame, and in the comics too for that matter. Find a way that the two can coexist. But whatever your reasons, yes, we are taking some barbarian levels now. For all those who've been requesting a paladin barbarian, you're welcome. So yes, speaking of that rage, at Barbarian 1, we get rage twice per day for now. As a bonus action, you can enter a state of rage that gives you all kinds of fantastic benefits so long as you're not wearing heavy armor. So, alas, it's time to doff that plate you've been wearing and pick up some half plate. And yes, this hurts us in particular because we only have a 10 dex, right? Which means a pretty significant blow to our armor class. I mean, we're not really building this character for tankiness, right? Instead, damage. But we do have some decent survivability features regardless, so I don't feel too bad about it. You could have taken a 14 dex and only a 10 constitution at character creation, of course, or even maybe lowered your charisma or something, but for reasons that I'm going to get into in a minute, I think we're better off with a higher constitution personally. Because, yes, while raging, we have advantage on strength checks and saves, which is particularly nice if you want to grapple or shove an enemy, right? Also, when you make strength-based melee weapon attacks, you get a little extra damage. It's just 2 more per hit, but we'll take it. And you have resistance to all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which, as we've often discussed, is most of the damage that your character is going to be subject to in D&D 5e. So that makes our hit to our armor class a little less painful. Keep in mind also that your rage ends early if you don't take damage or make an attack for a round, basically. So be sure to always try and be doing one or the other. Now, there is one big drawback to rage, of course, and it's that when you're raging, you cannot concentrate on or cast spells, which is a big bummer. That means no more bless. No bless for you. For that reason, you might actually be better off not raging most of the time, at least until next level when we get Reckless Attack, right? Now, once we have that, the benefits we get from rage make the loss of bless worth the trade-off, in my opinion. But at this level, maybe not. We do also, as barbarians, get unarmored defense at this level, feature we're probably not going to be using since it lets us add both our constitution modifier and our dexterity modifier together when we're not wearing armor to determine our AC. But we got a crappy dex score and just a mediocre con, so do not go naked. I know, it's tempting. At level 8, we would be a Barbarian 2. We get Danger Sense. That gives us advantage on dexterity saves against things that we can see, like spells and traps. That's nice, but in reality, like I say, with our crappy dex, we might just fail that dex save anyway, even if we have advantage. It will save you once in a while, though, so hey, no complaining. But the real gem here, of course, and the main reason we wanted to go Barbarian in the first place, at least mechanically speaking, was, yes, to pick up Reckless Attack. So now we can decide when we make our first attack if we want to attack recklessly, and doing so gives us advantage on all of our strength-based melee weapon attacks made this turn. The downside, of course, is that enemy attacks made against us have advantage until our next turn. Regardless, I would say you pretty much always want to have reckless attacks turned on, except in extreme circumstances, and this is why I think we're better off with a higher constitution than a higher dexterity on this character. Our enemies are going to have advantage to hit us pretty much all the time. And even if our AC was too higher with a higher dex score, they're still probably going to be hitting us more often than not anyway. We're not using a shield, right? We're not casting any spells that are raising our armor class. And so we're just not going to be super hard to hit. Conversely, since we will have resistance to most of the incoming damage anyway, having more hit points via a higher constitution score is likely going to be better for our survivability. At level 9, we'd be a Barbarian 3. First up, we get our 3rd rage per day, and this is actually pretty important, as I think it will mean that most of us are going to be able to rage every fight or almost every fight on most of our adventuring days. If you are someone who tends to have 4 or more combat encounters between long rests with consistency, you're gonna have to be a little more picky on when you rage, but hey, good news, at least when you can't rage, you can cast Bless. And actually, though I'm kind of joking a little bit there, this is an important point to make. The reality is, if you are truly only concerned about damage, you probably should use Bless instead of Rage. Against all but the lowest enemy armor classes, I'm talking 13 AC and lower, you would do more damage with a plus 1d4 to hit right now than you would with a plus 2 to damage on attacks. And that's mostly thanks to the Great Weapon Master, right? But that is assuming that we're still attacking recklessly, and with a 15 armor class, unless you have some magic items giving you more than that, we're going to be getting hit a lot, like I've said. And if we don't have resistance to the damage via rage, we're unlikely to stay alive for very long. Considering that we are like a frontline melee character, right? Now, obviously, you can choose to throw caution to the wind in the name of more damage. And actually, that might make sense for you based on your party makeup and or considering the route we're going with our subclass. Because yes, also at Barbarian 3, we get our Primal Path, our Barbarian subclass, and as I'm sure most of you were anticipating, we are going with the Path of the Zealot. It's just such a perfect fit for a Paladin, I think. And yes, maybe this is where our Paladin, who has sort of lost a little bit of their grip that they had on their anger and rage, starts to be able to rein it in a little bit, or at least has found a way to harness that rage, perhaps through some sort of spiritual awakening or vision or epiphany or reconciliation with their deity in a way that makes that anger feel a little more productive to them. Because as a zealot barbarian, as we read, they are a warrior who channels their rage into powerful displays of divine power. This is the point in our character's career where they take the next step in their evolution or story arc and sort of come into their own, and it will be a glorious thing to behold. We get two fantastic features as a zealot barbarian. First, Divine Fury, which tells us that when we are raging, the first enemy we hit with a melee weapon attack on our turn takes an extra 1d6 plus half your barbarian level rounded down in necrotic or radiant damage. You choose when you get this feature, and that's what it's going to be for the rest of your character's career. So probably want to go with radiant, as there tends to be less enemy resistance to radiant damage, and I think more enemy vulnerability too, if I'm not mistaken, though there's not a ton of that. We also, though, get Warrior of the Gods, which is just my favorite. It tells us that if a spell brings you back to life, so Revivify, Raise Dead, etc., then it doesn't cost material components to cast, and those material components are usually very expensive. Diamonds worth 300 plus gold, right? And this just really sort of lets us take the shackles off, throw caution to the wind, and embrace our role of meting out divine retribution on our enemies with a heretofore unseen level of fervor and zeal. For our level 9 damage report, then, we have changed things up quite a bit tactically. We're now no longer using Bless, but instead just raging and attacking on our turn, adding rage bonus damage, Divine Fury damage once per turn, attacking recklessly to gain advantage, and yes, still assuming Sacred Weapon and 4d8 smite on a crit, which will happen almost twice as often now, thanks to advantage, and yes, also still assuming the Find Steed attack. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 83 DPR, and against an enemy with a 16 armor class, it would be 58 damage per round. Still really solid. Still in the top half of like tier 1 builds by comparison at this level, with the understanding, of course, that the damage will be a little bit less when we don't have Sacred Weapon going, but also that we bring a nice suite of support and utility and burst options to the table as well. At level 10, our number one priority at this point, I think, now that we have advantage, is to get our strength score up. The 16 strength that we have is really hurting us, not just because we do a little less damage on a hit, but our plus to hit is a lot lower than I want it to be, especially if we want to keep using Great Weapon Master as we run into higher and higher enemy armor classes. So yes, at level 10, let's take one more level, I think, in Barbarian here to get that ability score increase or feat, and just bump our strength up to 18, which feels a lot better. But at level 11, I think it's time to go back to Paladin. We've made our peace with that inner rage and learned how to harness it for the cause of righteousness. So yeah, I want to return to our study and practice of devotion and really just stick with Paladin for the rest of our career. And so as a devotion pally at level 7, we get Aura of Devotion, and it tells us that you and friendly creatures within 10 feet of you can't be charmed while you are conscious. It's not the most amazing 7th level aura of the Paladin subclasses, but it's not bad. It's pretty solid. We'll take it. At level 12, we would be a Paladin 8, and we get another ability score increase or feat, and yeah, let's cap our strength here up to 20, and that's going to do really great things for our damage. At level 13, we'd be a Paladin 9, and we get 3rd level Paladin spells. If it were me, I think I'd probably take things like Dispel Magic, Revivify for a resurrection option, Aura of Vitality for a really strong heal that I'd probably only use between combats though, because it requires concentration. Basically things that really help us fill out our support options, which again is something that Paladins naturally excel at. Now, you could, of course, take Spirit Shroud to add 1d8 damage to all of your attacks, but since it requires concentration, you couldn't do this and rage, and just like with Bless, it's more damage than raging, but makes us a lot more vulnerable. So again, I would personally forego it, assuming I had a use of rage left anyway. And honestly, even if I didn't or were otherwise planning on concentrating on a spell in combat, I might stick with Bless anyway, since it's going to do more for our damage against enemy armor classes that we're likely seeing at character level 13, then an extra 1d8 of damage on a hit from Spirit Shroud would do. Not to mention, of course, the save benefits and the benefits to our other party members as well. So at level 13, it's time for our next damage report. The only thing that's really changed for us offensively is that we've capped our strength score, but let's not underestimate the importance of that. I mean, we do a really impressive amount of damage on every single hit right now. Assuming we're raging and using our sacred weapon and we have our great weapon master feat turned on, our damage when we hit is going to be whatever we roll plus 20. That's amazing, and I love it. There is nothing better than rolling a d4 for your butt action attack and being like, I rolled a 2, so 22 damage. Oh wait, you actually have great weapon fighting style, so re-roll that 2, and now it's 23 damage. Oh, one more thing. Now that we have more second and third level spell slots, combined anyways, than we do first level spell slots, I'm going to go ahead and assume that when we crit, we'll be able to do 6d8 on average, because we're doubling it, right? Instead of 4d8 as previously. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 98 DPR. And against a 17 AC, that's 74 damage per round. We were so close to breaking that centennial barrier. In fact, we would have gotten there against a low enemy AC if we were using like Spirit Shroud instead of Rage, but whatever. I still wouldn't do it if Rage were available. And we've maybe slipped just a skosh compared to other sustained DPR builds at this level. We're still pretty comfortably in the middle of tier 1, however. At level 14, we would be a Paladin 10, and we get Aura of Courage, which tells us that you and your allies within 10 feet of you can now also not be frightened. And this is normally already good, but I think when combined with a Devotion Paladin, it's really good. We're now immune to Frightened and Charmed, and those are two of the more common like enemy status conditions I feel like that potentially get thrown our way. I mean, our aura is just getting muy poderoso. But at level 15, we would be a Paladin 11, and we get Improved Divine Smite. And I love this ability, and I love the description of this ability actually almost as much as the mechanics of it. You are so suffused with righteous might that all your weapon strikes carry divine power with them. So yeah, from now on, every single melee weapon attack gets an extra 1d8 of radiant damage on a hit. Even our butt action. Freaking fantastic. At level 16, we would be a Paladin 12, and there are so many things that I would love to do with the ability score or feat that we get at this level, but I really do think that the best choice for both offense and defense is to bump our charisma, putting it at an 18 now. It improves every single saving throw for us and our nearby allies thanks to Aura of Protection. It makes most of our spells more effective and even increases our damage when we're using Sacred Weapon, among other things. So yeah, that's what I would do here. But finally, for us, at level 17, we'd be a Paladin 13, and we get 4th level Paladin spells. I was really happy to get here because while Banishment and Death Ward are fantastic options here, to name a couple, the one I'm going to focus on, of course, is Find Greater Steed. Sorry, Wilbur, you're being upgraded to a freaking griffin, because riding into battle on the back of a flying griffin might be one of the pinnacle experiences in all of D&D 5e, in my opinion. So yeah, with Find Greater Steed, it's worded almost identically to Find Steed, with the one big difference being that you can summon even cooler, more powerful steeds. My two favorites are the Rhinoceros, because, I mean, come on, but also because they have a cool charge attack and the best plus to hit chance of all of the options we get, and at this level you really might need that. I actually made use of the Rhino in the Pokemon trainer build that I did many moons ago. But anyway, against most enemy armor classes, the Griffin is going to do more damage on average, plus they can fly. So I'm going to assume we're using the Griffin when I crunch numbers. And speaking of, yes, at level 17, it is time for our final damage report. The big changes to our numbers come in the form of an upgraded steed, a little more charisma, and that sweet, sweet improved Divine Smite. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, at this level, we would do 119 DPR, And against an enemy with an 18 armor class, it would be 88 damage per round on average. Now, by comparison to other sustained DPR builds, we've slipped even just a little bit more. We're now sort of in like the bottom half of tier 1 by comparison, but that's still amazing. And so, final thoughts. The tier score for this character, when you average the damage that they do against all the enemy armor classes that we calculate for at each of the damage reports, is a 65, putting them right in the middle of tier 1, just above the dive bomber build, which was a little bit shticky but fun, and right below the artillerist build, which was doing damage against 2 enemies. Anyway, really, really solid. But of course, the best part about this character and the really impressive sustained damage that they do, they're a freaking paladin. I mean, you can burst with smite, you bring all kinds of support and utility versus your spells that admittedly you're probably only using outside of combat most of the time, but still, and via your wonderful auras that bring all sorts of defensive benefits for you and your party. And thanks to that and your resistance to most of the damage that you're going to be taking, you're going to be pretty beefy, hard to kill. You can heal, cure poison and disease, dispel magic, bring the dead back to life, all while raining down the might of the gods with divine fury. You can do it all. I can't wait to play this character in-game. Why haven't I built a sustained DPR Pally before? I think it might be pretty close to the top of my I want to play this in-game next list, which admittedly seems to change pretty much every episode. But still, I love it. But even more than this character build, I love you. Yeah, I'm talking about you because you're awesome. Thanks so much for watching and liking and subscribing and supporting all the things that you guys do. I hope that you'll check out the rest of the content in the channel if you don't typically, but more importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day and a fantastic week, and that you be good and stay safe and that you're kind, and that I see you again really soon. But until then, take care. Bye. I think we are ready to go. You feel the something calling you, you're wanting to return to where the misty mountains rise and friendly fires burn. Place you can escape the world where the Dark Lord cannot go. Peace of mind and sanctuary by loud waters flow. If you consider yourself to be a Rush fan, but are unfamiliar with their song Rivendell, you owe it to yourself to check it out. Summertime blues. Somebody's doing the dishes. Or does it have to have the heavy property? Gosh dang it, I can't remember. Let's look it up. For this reason, a lot of times you'll see people... Okay, thanks, software update. I don't want to do that right now. Doobie-doobie-doobie, we get to use it once per short rest to do... Speedy delivery. No nerdy t-shirt today. Just a nice image of the Grand Canyon. It's summertime. Go visit a national park. You are so suffused. Itchy nose.